The Volanthi research ship, called Whisper of Stars, moved slowly through the dark and empty space of the outer veil. It was a beautiful ship, built for science and discovery, not for fighting. Its hull was smooth and white, and inside its walls, 12 Volanthi scientists worked quietly at their stations. The Volanthi were a gentle species. They had skin that looked like living crystal, and they moved with careful, delicate steps. Their bodies were thin and fragile, and they spent their lives studying the stars rather than fighting wars. They believed that knowledge was the greatest treasure in the universe. Senior researcher Ilvani stood at the main sensor station, her crystal fingers moving across the controls. She was old by Volanthi standards, nearly 200 years, and she had spent most of those years mapping distant stars and studying strange planets. She loved her work. She loved the quiet peace of deep space. But today, that peace was about to end. The sensor console made a soft sound. Ilvani looked down and saw a new signal appearing on her screen. It was weak, barely visible among the background noise of space. But it was there, and it was repeating. She adjusted the sensors and listened more carefully. The signal became clearer. It was a distress call. Someone, somewhere, was asking for help. Ilvani felt her heart begin to beat faster. Distress calls were serious matters. According to Concordat law, any ship that received a distress call was required to either respond or pass the message along to someone who could. She traced the signal back to its source. It came from a small planet called Kethros 7, located in a mining region about 3 days away at standard speed. According to her records, Kethros 7 had a Talani colony. The Talani were small, furry creatures who lived underground and worked in mines. They were not fighters either. They were just workers and families trying to make a living. The distress call spoke of a reactor failure. Radiation was spreading. The colonists were trapped. They needed evacuation, but their own ships were too damaged to fly. Ilvani turned to face her crew. They all looked at her with wide, worried eyes. They knew what this meant. They knew they could not help directly. Their ship had no weapons, no heavy equipment, and no experience with rescue operations. If they tried to land on a radiation-filled planet, they would die within hours, but they could call for help. Ilvani moved to the communication station and began to compose a message. She set it to broadcast on all emergency frequencies, hoping that some Concordat patrol ship or rescue fleet would hear it and respond. She included all the information she had about Kethros 7, the colony, the reactor failure, and the number of people who needed rescue. She pressed the button and sent the message into the void. Space is very large. Signals travel at the speed of light, but even light takes time to cross the emptiness between stars. Ilvani's message flew outward in all directions, passing through asteroid fields and gas clouds and the empty spaces between solar systems. It passed through Concordat space, where sleek diplomatic ships and peacekeeping patrols moved along their scheduled routes. But none of them were close enough to respond quickly. The nearest Concordat military base was 8 days away. By the time they arrived, the colonists on Kethros 7 would already be dead. The signal kept traveling. It reached the edge of Concordat territory and passed into a region of space that most civilized species tried very hard to avoid. On official star charts, this region was marked with simple words of warning: Deathworld territory. No approach. The beings who lived in this region of space had come from a planet that should have killed them. Their world had crushing gravity that made bones break and muscles tear. Their atmosphere was filled with a highly reactive gas that caused fire and rust and decay. Their temperatures swung wildly from burning heat to freezing cold. Their oceans were filled with salt and monsters. Their land was covered with predators and poison and disease. By all logic, intelligent life should never have evolved on such a world. But it had. And those beings had not only survived their hellish birthplace, they had conquered it. They had spread across their planet, then reached for the stars. And now they roamed this region of space in ships that looked more like weapons than vessels. They called themselves humans. The distress signal reached a human ship called the Perseverance. It was a large ship, a dreadnought-class warship, but it had seen better days. Its hull was covered with scars from old battles. Some sections were patched with metal plates that did not quite match the original color. It moved slowly through space, limping toward home after a long and difficult fight with pirates in the Kepler marshes. Inside the ship, Communications Officer Elena Vasquez sat at her station, half asleep. The night shift was always boring. Nothing ever happened during the night shift. She was thinking about her bed and wondering how many more hours until her replacement arrived. Then her console beeped. She sat up straight and looked at the screen. An incoming signal. That was strange. They were far from any trade routes or communication relays. Who would be broadcasting out here? She adjusted her equipment and listened to the message. Her translation software struggled with the alien language, but slowly, word by word, the meaning became clear. Distress call. Reactor failure. Radiation. People dying. Help needed. Elena's tiredness vanished. She grabbed the communicator and called the bridge. Captain Marcus Cole was trying to sleep in his quarters when the call came. He had not slept properly in 3 days. The battle with the pirates had been brutal, and the journey home had been filled with problems. Half his crew was in the medical bay. His chief engineer was working around the clock just to keep the engines running. The ship needed repairs that they could not do in space-dot, but when he heard the message, he got out of bed immediately. He walked to the bridge, still pulling on his uniform jacket, and read the translated distress call on the main screen. A colony of small, peaceful aliens was dying on a poisoned world. They had called for help, and no one else was close enough to answer. His first officer, Commander James Wright, stood beside him. The older man looked tired, too. Everyone on the ship was tired. Wright spoke carefully. "Sir, we are in no condition for a rescue operation. Our shuttles are damaged. Our medical supplies are low. We have wounded crew members who need proper hospital care." Captain Cole nodded slowly. Everything Wright said was true. Taking on a rescue mission in their current state was dangerous. Maybe even foolish. He looked at the star map on the main screen. Kethro 7 was 2 days away. The nearest Concordat base was 8 days away. If the Perseverance did not respond, those colonists would die waiting for help that would arrive too late. Cole thought about the faces of his crew. He thought about the small, furry aliens trapped on a dying world. He thought about what it meant to be human. Then he gave his orders. Set course for Kethro 7. All ahead full. Wright did not argue. He simply nodded and began giving commands to the navigation team. The Perseverance turned toward the dying colony, its damaged engines flaring with new power. It was not the fastest ship in the fleet. It was not the strongest or the newest or the best equipped, but it was going anyway, because someone had asked for help. Colony Administrator Peckett had stopped hoping 3 hours ago. She sat in the corner of Emergency Shelter 7, surrounded by her people. There were 112 Telani in this shelter alone, packed together in a space designed for 60. The air was thick and hot, and the radiation alarms had been screaming for so long that she had forgotten what silence sounded like. Peckett was a practical woman. She had managed this colony for 15 years, through equipment failures and supply shortages and all the small disasters that came with living on a mining world. She knew how to solve problems. She knew how to keep her people safe. But she could not solve this problem. The reactor was destroyed. The radiation was spreading. Their communication systems had failed hours ago, and they had no idea if anyone had received their distress call. Even if someone was coming, they would probably arrive too late. She had already composed farewell messages to her family on the homeworld. She had told her husband that she loved him. She had told her children that she was proud of them. She had tried to explain why she was not coming home. The other colonists were doing the same. Some were crying. Some were praying. Some were just sitting quietly, holding hands with their loved ones, waiting for the end. The children were the hardest part. There were 23 children in shelter. 7, and they did not understand what was happening. They just knew that the adults were scared, and that made them scared too. Packet had tried to comfort them, but what could she say? How could she explain that help was not coming? Then the wall exploded. The blast threw Packet to the ground. Dust and debris filled the air, and for a moment, she thought the shelter had finally collapsed. She thought the radiation had broken through. She thought it was the end. But when the dust cleared, she saw something that made her heart stop. Creatures were stepping through the hole in the wall. Massive creatures twice the size of any Talani, wearing heavy suits of armor that covered their entire bodies. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors. They moved with terrifying speed and precision, spreading out through the shelter like predators entering a den of prey. The colonists screamed. Some tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Others fell to the ground and covered their heads, expecting to be killed. The children wailed in terror, clinging to their parents. One of the creatures walked toward Packet. It was the largest one, the leader. It stopped in front of her and reached up to its helmet. Everyone stay calm. The creature's voice boomed through an external speaker, translated into the Talani language. We are here to get you out. Who is in charge? Packet forced herself to stand. Her legs were shaking, but she was the administrator. These were her people. If these creatures wanted to hurt them, she would face that threat herself. I am, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I am Colony Administrator Packet. Who are you? What do you want? The creature removed its helmet. Packet had never seen a human before. She had heard stories, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about the Deathworlders. But nothing had prepared her for the reality. The face looking down at her was strange and terrifying. It had forward-facing eyes like a predator. Its skin was an odd pinkish-brown color. There was fur on top of its head, dark and short. And when it spoke, she could see its teeth, white and straight and sharp. My name is Cole, the creature said. Marcus Cole. My people are going to carry anyone who cannot walk. The rest of you, stay close, move fast, and do exactly what we tell you. Understood? Ticket's mind was struggling to process what was happening. You came for us? From where? Why? The human's expression changed. She did not know how to read human faces, but something in its eyes seemed to soften. Because you asked for help. Now let us move. We are on a clock. The next few hours were a blur of terror and exhaustion and wonder. The humans led them into the tunnels, moving quickly but carefully through the dark passages. They had lights. Attached to their suits, bright beams that cut through the darkness. They had devices that detected unstable rock and warned them of incoming collapses. They had medicine for the colonists who were already sick from radiation exposure. And they had strength. Incredible, terrifying strength when elderly colonists could not keep up with the pace. Humans carried them on their backs. When children cried and refused to walk, humans picked them up and held them gently, speaking soft words of comfort in their strange language. When the tunnels became too narrow for the group to pass, humans used their bare hands to widen the passages, pulling away rocks that would have taken Talani workers hours to move. Packet walked near the front of the group, staying close to Captain Cole. She watched him give orders, check on his team, and count the colonists over and over to make sure no one was left behind. He never stopped moving. He never complained. He never showed any sign of fear. But the tunnels were not safe. 2 hours into the journey, the first earthquake hit. The ground shook violently, and rocks began falling from the ceiling. Packet was knocked off her feet, and for a terrible moment, she thought they were all going to die. Then she felt strong hands grab her and pull her to safety. She looked up and saw a young human standing over her, shielding her body with his own as rocks crashed down around them. "Stay down," the human shouted. His name was Reyes, she remembered. The youngest member of the team. The earthquake lasted for nearly a minute. When it stopped, Packet could see that part of the tunnel behind them had collapsed. They could not go back even if they wanted to. "Everyone okay?" Captain Cole called out. "Count off." The humans checked the colonists for injuries. Some had minor cuts and bruises, but no one was seriously hurt. The humans themselves had taken the worst of it, using their bodies to protect the smaller, more fragile Talani. Packet saw blood on Reyes's arm, seeping through a tear in his suit. "You are hurt," she said. The young human looked at his wound and shrugged. "Just a scratch. I have had worse." They kept moving. 4 hours into the journey, the radiation started breaking through the tunnel walls. The human sensors began beeping. Warnings, and the team leader, Chun, adjusted their route to avoid the most contaminated areas. But there was no completely safe path. The radiation was everywhere. Packet noticed that the human suits were registering dangerous exposure levels. She could see the readings on their equipment displays, but they did not stop. They did not slow down. They kept walking, kept carrying the weak and the wounded, kept pushing forward. 6 hours into the journey, they entered a section of tunnel that was barely stable. The ceiling was cracked, and water was leaking through from somewhere above. Every step felt like it might trigger a collapse. Captain Cole stopped the group and studied the passage ahead. His face was grim behind his visor. "This section is bad," he said quietly to his team. "We need to move fast. Everyone takes a colonist and runs. We do not stop until we are through." The humans picked up every Talani who could not run on their own. Cole himself carried 3 children, 2 in his arms and 1 on his back. They began moving at a pace that would have exhausted a Talani in minutes. They ran for nearly a kilometer through the unstable tunnel. Behind them, Packet could hear the ceiling starting to crack. The ground was shaking again, smaller tremors building towards something bigger. Just as they reached the end of the dangerous section, the tunnel collapsed behind them. A wall of rock and dust came crashing down, sealing the passage forever. They had made it. Barely. Packet counted the colonists. All 112 were still there. None had been lost, but when she looked for the young human, Reyes, she did not see him in the group. "Where's Reyes?" she asked, fear rising in her voice. The humans looked at each other. No one had an answer. Captain Cole immediately turned back toward the collapsed section. "Reyes, can you hear me?" "Reyes." For a long, terrible moment, there was only silence. Then they heard something. A tapping sound coming from behind the wall of rubble, and a voice, weak but alive. "Captain?" "I'm okay. Got a little separated. Found a side tunnel. Can you get through?" "Working on it. There is someone here. A kid. Must have wandered away from the group. I have got him. We are coming." 14 minutes later, Reyes emerged from a crack in the rubble. His suit was torn in several places, and his skin was red and blistered from radiation burns. He was moving slowly, clearly in pain. But in his arms, he carried an unconscious Talani child. "Got separated," he said, as if this were completely normal. "Found this little guy hiding in a side tunnel. We good to go?" Packet felt tears running down her face. She did not understand these creatures. She did not understand how they could suffer so much for people they had never met. She did not understand why they were willing to die for strangers. but she was grateful. More grateful than she had ever been for anything in her entire life. They kept walking. They kept moving toward the light, and 2 hours later, they emerged on the southern plateau, where human shuttles were waiting to take them to safety. 847 colonists had been saved. Not a single one had been left behind. The crew of the Whisper of Stars had been waiting for 2 days. 2 long, terrible days of watching their sensors and hoping that someone would answer their call for help. The colonists on Kethro 7 were running out of time. The radiation was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Soon, it would be too late. Ilvani had barely slept. She spent most of her time at the sensor station, watching the empty space around them and praying to whatever gods the Volanti believed in. Her crew was scared. They all knew that if no one came, thousands of innocent people would die. And there was nothing they could do about it. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, something appeared on her sensors. At first, she thought it was a mistake. The readings were strange, unlike anything she had seen before. The object emerging from hyperspace was massive, much larger than any Concordat rescue ship. Its energy signature was wild and aggressive, full of radiation and heat and barely contained power. She adjusted her sensors and tried to get a better look. The image that appeared on her screen made her blood run cold. The ship was enormous. It was shaped like a giant wedge of dark metal, covered with armor plates and weapon systems. Its hull was blackened and scarred, marked with the wounds of countless battles. Some sections looked like they had been torn apart and welded back together with whatever materials were available. The whole thing looked less like a spaceship and more like a wounded predator, still dangerous, still hunting. Ilvani recognized the design from her history studies. She had seen pictures of ships like this in old war archives. Ships that had once terrified the entire galaxy. Ships that belonged to the most dangerous species in known space. Her second-in-command, Tovran, was standing behind her. His breathing became fast and shallow, his respiratory slits opening and closing rapidly. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Deathworlders. We called for help, and Deathworlders answered. The rest of the crew began to panic. Some of them started crying. Others began praying. One young scientist ran to the communication station and tried to send a warning message to the Concordat, telling them that a human warship was approaching. Ilvani forced herself to remain calm. She had studied humans in her youth as part of a xenobiology course. She knew the stories. She knew why everyone was afraid. Humans came from a planet called Earth. It was a world of nightmares, a place where everything seemed designed to kill. The gravity was so strong that it crushed weaker species within hours. The atmosphere was filled with oxygen, a highly reactive gas that caused fires and corroded metal. The temperature changed wildly from season to season, from burning summers to freezing winters. And the life forms on Earth were even worse than the planet itself. Predators with massive teeth and claws. Insects that spread disease and death. Plants that produced poison. Parasites that lived inside other creatures and ate them from within. Even the microorganisms were deadly, capable of wiping out entire populations of other species. Humans had evolved in this hellish environment. They were persistence hunters, predators who chased their prey for hours or even days, never stopping, never resting, until their victims collapsed from exhaustion. They had forward-facing eyes like all predators, designed to track movement and judge distance. They showed their teeth when they were happy, a display that looked exactly like an attack threat to every other species in the galaxy, and they refused to die. Humans could survive injuries that would kill any other sentient being. They could lose limbs and keep fighting. They could be poisoned and recover. They could endure pain and hardship that would drive other species insane. The Galactic Concordat had tried to contain them. For centuries, human space was quarantined, marked as forbidden territory. Civilized species were warned never to approach, never to make contact, never to give the Deathworlders any reason to leave their corner of the galaxy. But now, a human warship was right in front of them, and it was hailing them. Ilvani took a deep breath and accepted the communication request. A face appeared on her view screen. It was a human face, and it was terrifying. The creature had those awful predator eyes, dark and focused. Its skin was a strange brownish color, covered with tiny hairs. And when it spoke, it showed its teeth in that horrible display that humans called a smile. "This is Captain Marcus Cole of the United Earthship Perseverance," the creature said. Its voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "We received your distress call. How can we help?" Ilvani felt her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run away. But she was a scientist, and scientists face the unknown with courage and curiosity. "Captain Cole," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am senior researcher Ilvani of the Volanti science vessel Whisper of Stars. We did not expect. We did not know." She stopped, unable to find the right words. How could she explain that they had accidentally summoned the most feared species in the galaxy? The human seemed to understand. His smile changed slightly, becoming smaller and somehow softer. "You were expecting someone else. I get it. We are not exactly popular in this part of space." Ilvani nodded slowly. "We sent the distress call for the colony on Kethru 7. Their reactor is failing. Radiation is killing them. They need evacuation, but we cannot. We do not have the capability." "Tell me everything," the human said. His voice was serious now, all business. "How many people? What is the radiation level? How much time do we have?" Ilvani transmitted all the data she had collected. The human studied it carefully, his strange face showing expressions that she could not read. Behind him, she could see other humans moving around the bridge of their ship, working at stations and talking to each other in their harsh, guttural language. Finally, the human looked back at the screen. "Okay, we can do this. It will not be easy, but we can get those people out." Ilvani felt a strange sensation in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. "You will help them? Even though they are not human? Even though we are strangers?" The human tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. "You asked for help. Someone is dying. That is all that matters." He paused, and his eyes seemed to soften. Behind the predator gaze, Ilvani saw something unexpected. She saw kindness. She saw concern. She saw a creature that genuinely cared about people it had never met. "You folks look pretty shaken up," the human continued. "I understand. We are scary looking. But I promise you, we are not here to hurt anyone. We are here to help. That is what we do." Ilvani did not know what to say. Everything she had learned about humans, everything she had been taught to fear, seemed suddenly incomplete. Yes, they were Deathworlders. Yes, they were dangerous. But they were also something else. Something she had not expected. They were kind. The human ship moved past the Whisper of Stars and headed toward Kethru 7. As it passed, Ilvani could see the full extent of its battle damage. The ship was barely holding together. It was wounded and tired, clearly returning from some terrible fight. And yet, instead of going home to rest and repair, it was flying toward danger to save strangers. Tovrin spoke from behind her. His voice was still shaky, but there was something new in it. Confusion, perhaps, or wonder. "They came," he said. "We called for help, and they came. The Deathworlders came to help." Ilvani nodded slowly. Yes, they did. She watched the human ship disappear into the distance, heading toward the dying colony. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if the humans would succeed. But for the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than fear and despair. She felt hope. The Perseverance arrived at Kethro 7 and found a world that was dying. From orbit, Captain Cole could see the damage clearly. The colony was located in a valley between 2 mountain ranges, surrounded by mining facilities and processing plants. One of those plants, a nuclear reactor that provided power to the entire settlement, had suffered a catastrophic failure. Smoke and radiation poured from the broken building, spreading across the valley like a slow poison dot. The sensors told a grim story. Radiation levels were already lethal for most species. The Talani colonists had retreated to their emergency shelters, underground bunkers designed to protect them from minor accidents. But these shelters were never meant to handle a disaster of this scale. The radiation was seeping through the walls. The air filtration systems were failing. Without rescue, everyone in those shelters would be dead within 48 hours. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun stood at the tactical station, studying the sensor data. She was a small woman with dark hair and sharp eyes, and she had been serving on the Perseverance for 6 years. She had seen many difficult situations in that time, but this one was among the worst. "Standard evacuation will not work," she reported. "The radiation is too intense for our shuttles to make multiple runs. We could maybe get one trip in, but the pilots would receive dangerous doses. And the electromagnetic interference from the reactor is disrupting our transporter systems. We cannot beam anyone out." Chief Engineer Robert Morrison added his own analysis. "The ground around the colony is unstable. The reactor explosion triggered seismic activity. There are earthquakes happening every few hours. If we try to land a shuttle near the shelters, we might lose it to a quake." The bridge was silent. Everyone understood what these reports meant. A rescue was impossible. The mathematics were clear. Any attempt to save the colonists would result in the deaths of the rescuers, and probably fail anyway. Any Concordat species would have withdrawn at this point. They would have sent a message of sympathy to the Talani homeworld, recorded the coordinates for future memorial purposes, and left the colonists to their fate. It was the logical thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. Captain Cole stood at the center of the bridge, his arms crossed over his chest, staring at the main view screen. He watched the radiation readings climb. He watched the seismic activity increase. He watched the countdown timer that showed how much time the colonists had left. Then he spoke. "What about the old mining tunnels? The ones the colony abandoned last year?" Chem blinked in surprise and pulled up the geological surveys. A network of tunnels appeared on the screen, snaking through the mountains around the colony. The Talani had dug these tunnels years ago, searching for valuable minerals. When the minerals ran out, they sealed the tunnels and moved their operations elsewhere. "The tunnels are deep enough to provide radiation shielding," Chine said slowly, studying the data. "If we entered through the southern entrance, we could travel underground for most of the journey. The radiation exposure would be much lower." Morrison frowned. "But those tunnels are unstable. The seismic activity is causing collapses throughout the region. Anyone inside during an earthquake could be trapped or crushed." "What about the exit point?" Cole asked. Chun traced the tunnel route on the screen. "The tunnels emerge on the southern plateau, about 12 kilometers from the colony shelters. Radiation levels there are lower because of the mountain range between the plateau and the reactor. We could land shuttles there safely. So we go in through the tunnels, reach the colonists, and lead them out on foot to the southern plateau. 12 kilometers underground." The bridge crew exchanged worried looks. 12 kilometers was not a short distance, especially through collapsing tunnels in a hazardous environment. The Talani were small creatures, not built for long marches. Many of them would be weak from radiation sickness. Some would be children. Some would be elderly. Commander Wright spoke carefully. "Sir, Even if we could navigate the tunnels safely, we would be moving slowly. The journey could take 6 to 8 hours. During that time, we would be exposed to whatever seismic events occur. And our crew is already exhausted from the pirate engagement. We do not have many people fit for this kind of operation. Cole nodded. He knew all of this. He had calculated the risks in his head as soon as the plan occurred to him. He knew that sending people into those tunnels was dangerous. He knew that some of them might not come out, but he also knew that 847 colonists were waiting in those shelters, slowly dying from radiation poisoning. He knew that families were huddled together, trying to comfort their children. He knew that the Talani had no one else coming to save them. "I need volunteers," he said. "Ground team for tunnel rescue operation. Hazmat environment, high risk of collapse, possible combat conditions if we encounter hostile wildlife. I will not order anyone to do this. But I am going, and I need people to come with me." He expected hesitation. He expected his tired, wounded crew to think carefully before raising their hands. Instead, 23 hands went up immediately. Cole looked around the bridge, seeing the faces of his crew. They were tired. They were hurt. They were scared. But they were also ready. They had heard someone asking for help, and they were not going to ignore that call. He felt a surge of pride in his chest. This was why he loved serving with humans. This was what made his species special. Not their strength or their endurance, though they had plenty of both. What made them special was their refusal to abandon people in need. "I need 8, Cole said. "The tunnels are narrow. Too many people will slow us down." Choosing was difficult. He wanted to take everyone who had volunteered. But he had to be practical. He selected his 8 best people for this kind of mission. Strong, experienced, good at thinking on their feet. Lieutenant Chun was first. She was the best tactical officer on the ship, and she knew how to handle difficult terrain. Private First Class Diego Reyes was second. He was young, only 23 years old, but he was tough and brave and never complained about anything. The other 6 were equally capable. Sergeant Major Williams, a veteran of a dozen campaigns. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, their best field medic. Corporal Lisa Park, an expert in demolitions and tunnel navigation. And 3 others who had proven themselves time and again. They gathered in the armory and began preparing their equipment. Heavy environmental suits with radiation shielding. Breathing apparatus for the toxic atmosphere. Medical supplies for treating radiation sickness. Food and water for the long journey. Communication devices that might or might not work through the rock. Cole watched his team check their gear. They moved quickly and efficiently, professional soldiers preparing for a difficult mission. None of them showed fear. If they felt it, they kept it hidden. Morrison approached with a final warning. "Captain, I have run the numbers. Even with the suits, you will receive significant radiation exposure. If anything goes wrong, if you get delayed or trapped, you could receive lethal doses." Cole nodded. "Understood. And the seismic readings are getting worse. I estimate a major earthquake within the next 12 hours. If you are in the tunnels when it hits, then we will deal with it." Cole put a hand on Morrison's shoulder. "Keep the ship ready for extraction. When we reach the southern plateau with those colonists, I want shuttles waiting for us." Morrison nodded. There was nothing more to say. The team loaded into a shuttle and flew down toward the planet's surface. Through the windows, they could see the radiation clouds spreading across the valley, glowing with an ugly greenish light. They could see the mountains shaking from the ongoing seismic activity. They could see the entrance to the mining tunnels, a dark hole in the side of a cliff, waiting to swallow them. Cole looked at his team. 8 humans against a dying planet. 8 lives risked for 800 strangers they had never met. It was not smart. It was not safe. It was not logical, but it was right. "Let's go save some people," he said. The shuttle landed, and the team stepped out into the fire. The Perseverance limped away from Kethro 7 with 847 Telani survivors packed into every available space. The ship had never been designed to carry so many passengers. Colonists filled the cargo bays, the recreation areas, the corridors, and any other space large enough to hold a small, furry body. The environmental systems were working at maximum capacity to keep everyone breathing. The food synthesizers were running constantly to feed the hungry refugees, but no one complained. The Telani were alive, and that was all that mattered. Captain Cole stood in the medical bay, looking down at the members of his rescue team. 3 of them were in critical condition. Lieutenant Chun had a collapsed lung from a falling rock. Sergeant Williams had radiation burns covering most of his back. And Private Reyes, the young man who had gone back for a lost child, was in the worst shape of all. The doctor said he would survive, but he would need months of regenerative therapy to repair the damage to his body. 2 other team members had received radiation doses that would require long-term treatment. Everyone on the team would carry scars from this mission, physical and otherwise. Cole felt tired, more tired than he had ever felt in his life. He had led many missions in his career, but none had taken as much out of him as this one. He had watched his people suffer. He had seen them push themselves beyond any reasonable limit. He had asked them to risk their lives for strangers, and they had done it without hesitation. And they had succeeded. Dr. Okonkwo approached him with a tablet showing medical reports. "The colonists are doing well," she said. "We have treated the most serious radiation cases, and the rest should recover with proper care. The Telani are remarkably resilient for their size." Cole nodded. "And our people? Everyone will survive. Chun and Williams will be back on duty within a few weeks. Reyes will take longer, but he is young and strong. He will recover." "Good." Cole paused. "Thank you, Doctor, for everything." Okonkwo smiled. "Thank you, Captain, for giving us the chance to do something that mattered." Meanwhile, on the Volanthi research vessel Whisper of Stars, senior researcher Ilvani was composing the most important message of her life. She had recorded everything. She had captured sensor data showing the human ship arriving. She had recorded their communications, their planning, their rescue operation. She had documented every moment of the mission, from the initial contact to the final evacuation. Now she was sending it all to the Galactic Concordat. She was sharing the story with every species in the civilized galaxy. She knew it would cause chaos. For centuries, the Concordat had treated humans as dangerous animals, monsters to be avoided at all costs. They had built their entire foreign policy around containing and isolating the Deathworlders. But what Ilvani had witnessed changed everything. She had seen humans risk their lives, destroy their bodies, and nearly die to save people they had never met. She had seen them carry children through collapsing tunnels and shield strangers from falling rocks. She had seen them refuse to give up, refuse to stop, refuse to leave anyone behind. They were not monsters. They were heroes. Her message spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, it had been viewed by billions of beings on thousands of worlds. News networks on every Concordat planet showed the recordings of the rescue. Experts analyzed the footage, explaining what the humans had done and how impossible it should have been. Religious leaders debated the spiritual implications of Deathworlders, showing such compassion. The Galactic Concordat Council convened an emergency session. Ambassador Keth of the Volanthi spoke first. He was an old diplomat, careful with his words, but today he spoke with unusual emotion. "For 300 years, we have treated humans as threats. We have quarantined their space. We have warned our people to avoid them. We have taught our children to fear them." He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. We were wrong. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives agreed with Keth. Others argued that one rescue mission did not change centuries of evidence that humans were dangerous. Still others suggested that the humans might be trying to trick them, using a staged rescue to lower the Concordat's defenses. But the tide was turning. Too many people had seen the recordings. Too many people had watched a young human emerge from a collapsed tunnel, his body broken and burned. Still carrying a child he had refused to abandon. Ambassador Keth continued. They are monsters, yes. They come from a world of death, and they are shaped by that world. But perhaps we have been looking at this wrong. Perhaps monsters are exactly what this galaxy needs. He let that statement hang in the air before finishing his thought. They are our monsters, and they are willing to suffer for us. Word of the rescue reached Earth 3 days later. The story spread across human space with incredible speed. News networks broadcast the footage constantly. Social media was flooded with discussions and debates and celebrations. People who had never thought much about their species' place in the galaxy suddenly felt a surge of pride that the humans had done something good, something heroic, something that made the whole universe take notice. And in shipyards from Luna to Titan, from Proxima Centauri to the distant colony worlds, something began to change. Engineers who had been building cargo ships started redesigning them as rescue vessels. Military commanders who had been playing defense strategies started planning humanitarian missions. Scientists who had been studying weapons technology started studying alien biology instead, learning how to treat species they had never met. The United Earth Navy called a meeting of all its senior officers. The discussion lasted for 12 hours, but the conclusion was clear from the beginning. Humanity had a new mission. 2 months after the Cathro 7 incident, Concordat sensors detected something emerging from human space. Ships. Dozens of them at first, then hundreds. Dreadnoughts and carriers and hospital ships and engineering vessels, moving in perfect formation toward the galactic core. The Concordat watched in amazement as the Deathworlder Armada advanced. But these ships were not configured for war. Their weapons were powered down. Their cargo holds were filled with medical supplies and food and construction equipment. Their crews included doctors and engineers and specialists in every kind of disaster relief. The humans were not coming to conquer. They were coming to help. Captain Cole stood on the bridge of the repaired and upgraded Perseverance, watching the stars pass by as the fleet moved deeper into Concordat space. Behind him, Private Reyes was back on duty, his wounds healed, his spirit unbroken. The whole crew was there, ready for whatever came next. A message came through from the Concordat. Ambassador Keth appeared on the view screen, his crystalline face showing an expression that Cole was learning to recognize as hope. Captain Cole, on behalf of the Galactic Concordat, I want to thank you for what you did on Cathro 7. Your actions have changed everything. Cole nodded. We did what anyone would do. Keth made a strange sound that might have been laughter. No, Captain. That is exactly the point. No one else would have done what you did. No one else could have done it. Only Deathworlders could have walked through that fire and come out the other side. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with emotion. For 300 years, we have feared you. Now, for the first time, we understand what we were truly afraid of. And what is that? Cole asked. We were afraid of hope. We were afraid of what it would mean if beings like you truly existed. Beings who would suffer and die for strangers. Beings who would never give up, never stop, never abandon anyone. Keth shook his head slowly. We were afraid to believe that such kindness could come from such a terrible place. Cole considered this for a moment. Then he smiled, and for once, the expression did not look like a threat. Ambassador, where we come from, the terrible places create the kindest people. You have to be strong to survive. but you also have to help each other. That is the only way anyone makes it through. He looked out at the stars ahead, at the billions of worlds waiting to meet humanity for the first time. We have been alone for a long time, isolated, feared, but now you have called for help, and we are answering. Every world in this galaxy that needs us, we will be there. Every disaster, every crisis, every moment when someone needs a hand to hold or a back to lean on. He turned back to the view screen, to the alien ambassador who was looking at him with something close to wonder. That is what Deathworlders do. The fleet continued its advance, carrying the hope of humanity to the stars and across the galaxy. Species who had spent generations fearing the monsters of Earth looked up at the sky and, for the first time in their history, felt something new. They felt safe, because the Deathworlders were coming, and they were coming to help.